Nearly 60% of Afghans sent a clear message to the Taliban. They want to choose their next president with ballots, not bullets. But how will the next president reconcile Afghanistan's warring ethnic groups, and can he bring the Taliban to the negotiating table? Well, joining me now to discuss those questions is Ali Ahmad Jalali. He served as Afghanistan's Interior Minister from 2003 to 2005. In that role, he helped build a trained force of Afghan National Police and Border Police to fight terrorism and the narcotics trade. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
So by all accounts, the election went off very well. 7 million people voted, 1/3 of them being women. But there are now major challenges ahead for Afghanistan. What's the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is the next government, how the winner will bring together all parties, all groups in Afghanistan to form a very effective and all-inclusive government. That's the challenge, I believe. And the way the elections went by and the way the candidates campaigned and promised that they will try to bring everybody together in the new government, I hope there will be a better chance for Afghanistan to stabilize itself, and also to encourage the opposition or armed opposition to come to the negotiating table.
That's right. One of the things that marked this election was the fact that the candidates didn't attack each other. They actually were talking about the policies they want to implement in Afghanistan. But is there a danger that the gloves could come off, after the winner is announced?
Well, it depends. I believe the way all these front runners expressed to the people of Afghanistan that they will accept the results of the election if it is acceptable to the majority of the people of Afghanistan. I don't see much problems once the results are announced, because during the campaigns and in surveys that was done by Afghans themselves, I think it is quite clear that there are already 2-3 front runners, and they all believe that the future of Afghanistan or the legitimacy of the government in Afghanistan depends on them to accept the results of the election.
This election was also marked by a relatively low level of violence, despite threats from the Taliban. To what do you attribute this? Is this telling us that the Taliban's support, the attraction for the Taliban or its influence is waning?
I think the attacks that Taliban is made people more in the Taliban were afraid of the election, participation of people in election, because that would bring legitimacy to the system, delegitimize them. Therefore, they tried very hard. I think the security forces did a great job. At the same time, many plots, many attacks were foiled before they took place. On the day of election, there were only 20, I think, casualties, or 20 from army and the police were killed. It's opposed to 90 or almost 90 of Taliban who killed during these attacks. So it means that the people are now more and more trust their security forces. And on the other hand, one thing probably is not reported very well. Afghanistan society is totally changed. It is a society that they are no longer try to play politics by ethnicity or region or the language they speak. I think they know that after 12 years that the future of Afghanistan depends on a unified nation, that regardless of different ethnicities or different languages that they speak, I think the country is getting more and more integrated into a nation.
Right, and when we look at the number of women who voted in this election, as I mentioned at the outset, 1/3 of the 7 million people who voted were women. What does that tell us?
I think the women became very active in the past few years. The women actually became part of the political, economic, and social, activities of the country. They're involved in business and the government. I think that has changed the situation very much.
I want to look ahead now to what happens after a winner is announced. We know that, and Afghanistan's relations, especially with the United States, we know that President Hamid Karzai has not signed that bilateral security agreement with the United States. It's led to strains in the relationship, but all the candidates who ran in this election said that they will sign the agreement. I want you to take a listen to what a former U.S. envoy to Afghanistan and Pakistan, Ambassador Mark Grossman, had to say. Let's listen.
Just my observation as an outsider, I'm not an Afghan, but my observation as an outsider is the fact that the BSA has not yet been signed has added to a lot of uncertainty in Afghanistan. And I think what Afghans need right now is certainty. Certainty that the international community is going to stick with them. Certainty that on January 1, 2015, they won't be abandoned. And so I think it's too bad that the BSA hasn't been signed. I think the administration has done as best as it can, which is to say, well, if President Karzai is not going to sign it, too bad. We'll sign it with the next person.
All right, so what we're hearing from the ambassador there is that the ball is now in Afghanistan's court.
That's true. I think all political leaders, including President Karzai, believe that without BSA, with signing of BSA, Afghanistan will not be able.
BSA being the bilateral security
agreement. Security agreement with the United States. Without that document being signed, I think Afghanistan will not be able to expect kind of a substantial assistance from the international community. Afghanistan, cannot pay for its army, its armed forces. So therefore, it needs the international assistance for a long time. So therefore, the signing of BSA is something which created top priority of the agenda of the front runners. And everybody of them said they will sign the BSA when they are elected.
One of the contentious issues about that security agreement is the number of troops that will stay behind. That will be United States troops as well as troops from NATO allies. Where is that figure at the moment? I've heard figures from 10,000 to 20,000.
I don't think the numbers are very important. They are the only factors that you have to think about. I think the very presence of the international community in Afghanistan is important, because once there is a presence of the US troops and NATO troops in Afghanistan, the countries of the donor countries will be in a better position to convince their congresses, their parliaments, to continue to support Afghanistan and national security forces and development in Afghanistan.
So are you saying the presence of these troops will be more symbolic than anything else? I mean, what will they be doing in Afghanistan?
I think two things very important. One is to continue to fight terrorism, which is beyond the capacity of Afghan national security forces. Second, to train and also assist the Afghan security forces. Afghanistan does not have a strong air force. The airlift capacity is not there. Intelligence capacity is limited. At the same time, logistic capacity is limited. So therefore, the presence of the international forces at the same time actually is a kind of force multiplier for the Afghan national security forces, both qualitatively and quantitatively.
Right, as you point out, the Afghan security forces may not have the capacity to, Air Force capacity, as you mentioned, intelligence, logistics, etc. But what do you make of the way in which they acquitted themselves during the election now?
During the election, actually, I think they did a great job because they provided physical security of the polling stations. But in order to go after the terrorists, after the insurgents who are coming from across the border, I think you need more sophisticated kind of planning and a capacity to plan and conduct very sophisticated operations.
But does all this add up to the fact that, when you look at the conduct of the election, the number of people who turned out, the fact that the security forces were able to secure the country for the election, does it all add up to pushing the Taliban perhaps to the negotiating table?
I think it is, because that was a very strong message. Somebody asked me who is going to be the winner. I said, and now I think the people of Afghanistan are the winner. And I think this is going to be a major impact on the Taliban, that they cannot win. I think this will convince them that what they can get through negotiations with the government is probably more substantial than if they continue to fight. Because the longer the state survives, the less chance they will have to get their way.
Okay, I want to look at the role of other countries, especially those countries in the region, and of course, one of the major powers there is China.
Yes.
And let's take a listen to what the Chinese ambassador to Afghanistan had to say about the election.
China will respect the path of development chosen by Afghan people according to their own national interest.
That was Ambassador Xu Feihong there, who is the Chinese ambassador to Afghanistan. What kind of a role can a country like China play in Afghanistan?
China has been a traditional friend of Afghanistan, and I think China is very keen to continue to invest in the rebuilding of Afghanistan, in the development of its natural resources. Stability in Afghanistan at the same time is in the best interest of security in China, particularly in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Some of the secessionist movements who are outside this area, they are being trained in some area in South Asia. And this instability in Afghanistan can create ungoverned areas where these extremists can establish their bases, and from these bases can pose threats to China, security in China. So therefore, I think China several times has actually very clearly said that stability in Afghanistan, security in Afghanistan is in the best interest in the region, including China.
Mr. Jalali, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.